Hey guys, welcome back. This is Mo with another subwoofer repair. Today we got a somewhat of a special treat, a behemoth of a subwoofer. This is the American Bass 15-inch. It's the HD15, what is it? HD15D1, which is a 15-inch subwoofer, dual 1 ohm, a voice coil. This came in regards to the fact that it's just not working. They tried to play and it sounds like crap. One voice coil is completely open. The other one sounds like it's on its way out. So I wanted to walk you through the entire repair process here. Even though it's big, heavy, intimidating, it's actually relatively easy to take apart. And so I wanted to kind of walk through that. But just a little bit about the subwoofer. It's a 15-inch dual voice coil, pretty large magnet. So it's stated as a 300-ounce magnet. I did weigh it. It came in at 44.8 pounds, so pretty heavy. Aluminum stamped, whatever it is, basket, pretty heavy duty. My understanding is this is the same basket used by a few other folks. Was it Sound Cubed, DB Drive, some other folks. So it's not just generic to American Bass, but overall pretty beefy. The voice coil, I guess it's over a 3-inch. I think it's supposed to be an odd size. That's why I'm eager to kind of get this disassembled to kind of really see what the dimensions of the voice coil are. But it came in, again, the paper cone. This is supposed to be non-pressed paper cone. Same thing with the dust cap. High roll surround here. It's not rubber, it's foam, but still pretty good. Double stitched, red stitching here on the cone itself. The tinsel leads have 8 gauge, it looks like, 8 gauge oxygen free copper attached right to the tinsel leads, which is great. If you've seen some of my other videos, I do take jabs at the fact that people will buy the best wiring just to attach to some partially steel with a nickel plated spring terminal, right? But that's the common thing. That's what manufacturers like to do because it's cheap, it's quick. So I do like on the higher end subwoofers that you see from other manufacturers that they have the direct wire leads. Again, you're gonna end up still needing hardware to attach to something else. So it's not that big of a deal. And to be honest with you, performance degradation, it's not really there. So anyways, it's also a marketing gimmick to sell more. So that being said, I wanted to walk you through what I did here, and I'm gonna show you all the tools I'm using. And right now it is 4 tools. Pretty easy, really easy. So as you're aware, one of my favorite tools to take the surrounds off is this wood chisel. And what I do is I try to sharpen it a little bit to get a nice fine edge on it. And I try to carefully get it under the edges of the foam surround or rubber surround where it is. And in this particular case, I already get started. And what I did is just kind of work my way around the entire area carefully. It took me about 30 minutes or so to try to peel that back away. Again, it's usually held by some sort of rubberized adhesive like E6000 or silicone type material. And so I was careful to kind of just walk all the way around the entire frame to remove the surround. And now I've got the surround loose, which is easy. You want to be careful not to poke the actual surround because that's just another repair you got to deal with. So what I did here is take care of the entire top. Now looking at the bottom to see what I needed to disassemble here is the cool thing about this. It looks like a double spider, so it's actually got 2 spiders as part of the suspension, but the spiders are attached to this ring on the inside. And if you can zoom in a little bit here and look with me, you'll see that there is, let's see if I can get a better angle for you guys. There's this ring that is holding the spider in place. So you can see there's a spider, there's the tinsel leads in the back, and this ring holds the 2 spiders in place. And what holds the ring in place to the actual frame are a bunch of screws, Phillips head screws that are screwed in directly into the frame. In fact, if you flipped it upside down, you can see where it's tapped and where the hole comes out of. So what I did here is use my little handy tool. I was able to get this from Alibaba. It's basically a ratcheting bit that you can add different bits, whether it's flathead, Phillips, Torx, etc. and you can adjust it whichever way you want. I was able to use this, get it right in here, and carefully go from screw to screw and loosen up all of the screws that were holding the spider ring in place. And that spider ring is a plastic kind of ring, again, that mounts directly to this. What I like so far is I noticed that they don't use adhesive to hold the spider ring to the frame. They only use adhesive to use the spider ring to the actual spider, which is cool. And so once I unscrewed all the screws on the spider ring, let me zoom back out here, guys. I got a heavy duty flathead, and what I did is just carefully go around and try to put a little bit of pressure and tension on the ring itself to lift it off the cavity that it's sitting in. And you can see, hopefully you can see, it kind of is loose already. So again, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And the next thing I want to do, as these leads are currently zip tied in place, I want to go ahead and cut them off. So that way nothing else is holding in place. So I get this off. Now you've got the leads all loose. Just be careful not to mess with them too much. And let me twist the other side. Here we go. All right, man, this thing is pretty beefy. So it's worth its weight. Just even if it's damaged, you can always recycle the frame or the magnet motor combination. So I've got, overall, my surround is loose. So as you can see here, got the surround completely loose. If I zoom in a little bit on the inside, I apologize about the lighting if it's not good. Here you go. And you can see here's the edge of my spider ring. And what I should be able to do now that everything is disconnected, I should be able to basically lift this entire assembly out with a little TLC. And so I'm gonna carefully take my tool here. There we go, which is a heavy duty Phillips head. I'm sorry, flathead. And just lift on it and see if I can get that spider ring to come up out of its place now as I'm lifting up. There you go. Got right under it. Okay. I can really use 3 hands here, guys. Well, the good thing is there's no adhesive. The bad thing is it's in there tight. So, and you never want to force anything if you feel like you could potentially damage something. So I think I got most of it here. I'm just gonna work it with my hands now as I can feel it coming up. There we go. There we go, some little adhesive here. All right, let's see. This might be the final piece. All right, guys, so here we go. I should be able to just pull this out or not. It's like home projects, right? It's like you think something's gonna be easy and you start working on it and then you've got to take like 5 trips back to Home Depot. So this, oh, I see. So as mentioned, there's 2 spider rings. So I was able to lift one of the 2 spider rings. And let me see if I can just take my phone out. Give you guys a better view here. All right, so there are 2 rings that are holding the spider in place. And here is one right now. If I lift it up, you can see that one ring already has 1 spider attached to it. And so I've got to get to that other ring down below, which is going to, again, be straightforward. But here it is. You can see the screws that were holding this ring in place, and it was also holding the bottom ring. So that'll be interesting to kind of get this all attached together later on. But let me go ahead and start getting my tool right under here. Of course, you know I love my accessory pick tool. And then I'll loosen this up and then get the camera mounted back up. All right, guys. Well, that took a little bit of effort, but was able to make some progress on this. So what happened, as I mentioned, Now that I've got this apart, let me take a closer view over here. Here's one of the rings that you see. In fact, here you see two rings and one actually broke off. So we had one ring holding each spider. So here's the top one where I'm pointing my finger right here is attached to the top spider. And this bottom one was supposed to be holding the bottom spider in place. But as you can see, it kind of broke off on me, not a big deal. But I also noticed the spider came off very clean from what you would call a triple joint. So in this particular case, I guess the triple joint, it's got two triple joints, right? Because you got two spiders and they attach to the cone in one location and the coil in a similar but different location. Here's what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna put my finger here. This is one of the triple joints where it meets the spider to the coil and usually to the cone. But the bottom one doesn't really touch the cone. It's the top one that does. So that triple joint looks at the cone, touching the spider, touching the voice coil. So it's a double stacked spider configuration. So that's made it kind of hard to pull out. But here you see the thickness of the double rings, and in one area, you'll see basically just one side. So that's where it snapped off right here. But it's all good. I can still repair this. So here's the voice coil. Got this out now. All right. Got the voice coil. You can see it was already damaged. It was unwinding, and it's on its way out. So the good thing about these, the fact that they're intact allows me to take some really good measurements. As I said, for every subwoofer repair that I have, it's important to kind of keep the integrity of this. It's not always the case, and we have to do process of elimination like I've showed in other videos, but this particular one made it easy because it is mainly intact. I was able to get, you know, the outer diameter, so the outer diameter of the voice coil, the inner diameter of the voice coil, the winding height, sometimes referred to as the winding width here, of how much copper or aluminum is around. Also the former outer diameter, this is the former or the aluminum internal structure that the winding is placed on. As you can see, this gap here to prevent any eddy currents or shorts of the actual current. And what else? And then also the height. So two important things I have to measure is the point from right here, which is this triple joint. Usually there's one triple joint. In this case, that's fine, there's two. But I take the very bottom measurement to the very bottom of the coil, because when I put a new one in, I want this to be identical. I want to be able to seat it in the same exact place. So when I get a new coil, I try to make sure these dimensions the same as far as winding width, and then the overall space from the very end to here is the same. That way, as it moves through the gap up and down and kind of in the y-axis, is that it's not bottoming out and it's made to the manufacturer specifications. So I do measure the overall height too. So I look down here, as you can see, I can measure from the very tip to the bottom. Usually that's not as significant to me because I can always get it bigger and cut the top like I have with some of the other voice coils. But again, dimensions are important, and I'm going to show that's really what allows me to go out and get some of these parts. So as you can see, I took all the dimensions. So if this was the spider right here, this is where the spider, that triple joint would be all the way down. And so I take all the dimensions that I have. This is the seating dimension. This is the winding width. This is the OD and ID, right? And I was able to match it up with some of the voice coils available out there for purchase. So I reached out to good old George Compost at American Bass, and just wanted to kind of see what really matched, and it made sense that he had one in stock under the 3-inch voice coil section, and something that was pretty close, right? So when we're talking about former height, the one that's going to come in is about 140 millimeters in height. Well, right now I'm measuring 125 total, which is great. So it's going to come in longer, which is going to give me a little bit. Once I seat it, then I can cut the very top. So that's good. Winding width is also the winding height, 63.5. I've got 62.3. 1 millimeter difference. Again, very close in range, and it's not going to impact anything. OD and the ID is important, right? So we want to stay very, very close. So the OD which is great. So when it fits in that gap, got it slightly slimmer than what's currently in there in case there's a tolerance issue. So I know it's gonna fit in my gap and it's not gonna rub. And then the ID also slightly larger than what I measured, 75.8, 76.65. This could also be associated with the tolerances of our calipers or micrometers, right, that we use for measurements. So overall, I was able to get this SKU number right off the Lord of Bass website, get that on order in order to go ahead and replace this one. Here's where I was showing the screws that hold, I guess not just one spider ring, but two. And I guess there's a total of 6 to 8 all the way around that are in there. And I'll keep these in place because once I kind of replace the coil back, I'll try to just remove it very smoothly, keeping everything else intact. That way I can remove the old one and then put a new one in, adhere it, make sure it's leveled, and keep everything intact, right? Really use some strong adhesive. This is a beefy subwoofer. It's gonna see a lot of pressure. I wanna make sure I use the best adhesives and bonding that I can. I do still have this spider here. This is the bottom spider. Still kind of disappointed it came off. I'm sorry, it didn't come off and it's stuck on here, but if I try to remove it, I'm probably gonna damage it. And I can make this repair without having to remove the spider. What I will do is I will slightly kind of take not an abrasive to cut the tool, but I wanna clean it up. So that way when I do put epoxy on here and I seed the entire cone assembly back in place, it will end up bonding this portion right here to this triple ring portion right here. And I'll be able to put epoxy on here as well, ensuring that none of the epoxy leaks back into the gap on the inside. And then I can just always realign the spider rings here, and that shouldn't be a problem. And as you can see, here are the holes where the spider ring holder screws are gonna be in place. So that should be an easy fix. As you can see, I had to remove the dust cap, which is expected no matter what. Now, you may not have to remove it for removal, but you certainly are going to have to remove it when you seat it, because once I put it back on, I'll have to put spacers between the voice coil and the center yoke to make sure it doesn't rub. I did try to reserve it for the most part. I probably will not use it. I went ahead and ordered a couple of other dust caps from Lord of Bass, plus I have some lying around here that I'll be able to leverage. So now I will go ahead and just wait for the new voice coil. And while I'm waiting, I'll just start removing this carefully. I'll try to keep as much as intact, but usually with these aluminum formers, which is the inside material, they break apart pretty easily, and this is on its way out anyways. I mean, you can see it's gonna start unwinding as I start handling it. So here we go. Let's get another video once the coil gets in and everything's cleaned up, and we'll walk through the assembly process. You can see here I have some prep work to do. This is from the surround. So I will remove all of this with a sharp blade first, and then I'll take an abrasive, either tool, Dremel tool, or something else, and clean the surface off. That way when I do put new adhesive on the top, it really has a good bond. There's not much to do here other than just clean and prepare it for the reattachment using the screws itself. I'm not gonna try to use epoxy. I'm gonna just base it off of the actual screws, because that's what they used. It looks like they only used epoxy on the very bottom spider, which is bonded really well to this edge. It didn't bond very well to this edge, but so I will make sure I put good epoxy here. And then I won't use epoxy again. I'll use E6000 or something else, but this should be good. Hoping it's an easy fix. Again, it might be a little bit more intimidating because of the size of the subwoofer, but they're all pretty much the same. All right, stay tuned. All right, guys, so got the voice coil out. So you can see, here it is. The way I did it, obviously this was in here. I was able to squeeze around the former a little bit, and that usually breaks away either the insulation material, which is capped on, or this paper-like material here, which is just traditionally also used for industrial transformers. You can see the capped on tape is still kind of right there. And so what they have is an aluminum former, so aluminum sheet with a split in the middle, so it doesn't show out the entire coil, plus eddy currents. And then they wind capped on around it. And then they'll put this paper coating as well to make it easier to wind the wire. This particular wire, I went ahead and just kind of scratched it up to see what kind of wire it was and confirmed that it was indeed aluminum. So it's just aluminum with polyimide layers. Again, there's multiple approaches to polyimide. You can do a single, double, triple, quadruple layer of polyimide, and that's what gives it kind of this orange-like color, but it's actually insulated wires. It's called magnet wires. So pretty cool. Got it well, not disconnected, but completely removed. And here I've got my opening. And so this allows me to prepare for the new voice coil. As you can see, I've got the temporary leads, which are currently tied to the tensile lead joints. So as you can see, they're kind of epoxied in here. So there's one point and there's another point for one of the voice coils. This wire tip right here was attached to the actual voice coil, so it's eventually soldered to here. Another piece I broke off previously, which is not a big deal, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill around here, clean these up, get me a nice good location to solder onto. That way it'll be easier. It'll be a little harder because it's aluminum wire, but there's tricks to it. Just adding some Vaseline on here. The Vaseline allows it to heat up pretty rapidly when I solder onto it, and it works pretty good. So here are the other 2 points for the other voice coil. So I'll clean up the inside. Again, once I receive the new voice coil, I'll make sure that it's a good diameter. I may have to go back and just remove a little bit on the inside with a Dremel tool. And just try to keep it as circular as I can. As you can see, I didn't mess with the triple joint ring. This is a second triple joint, so there's a ring here, and then there's also a ring on the inside. So there's a triple joint portion here, which is at the very top, and then there's one right below it, right? All right, so now it is just ready for the new coil, and once I get it, I'll mount it, solder it, make sure it's all good, leveled, epoxied, and then we'll start putting the subwoofer together. All right, guys, so I was able to get the new voice coil. Got this from Bass. I'll post the part number in the comments. And so this is a 3-inch, 4-layer aluminum wire voice coil. It's on aluminum former. And so I was able to get it in. And the first thing I did, again, see that red line here with my Sharpie right at the edge, is I measured exactly the dimensions of where the triple joint to the bottom coil would be. This is the same measurement that I took here, which is approximately 83.25 millimeters. So that when I do place the voice coil inside of the spider and the cone assembly, it ensures that when it does get seated inside of the motor, it's the same dimensions that were set by the factory itself. So that was very important. So once I marked it at 83.25, which is this red line, I went ahead and placed my voice coil in. As you can see, the voice coil that I purchased originally was 139.7 millimeters. I really needed 125 millimeters. So what does that mean? It means I'm gonna have excess on the backside. So if I flip it over, here you go. You see the excess, which is okay, because what I'll do is that this is just the former itself. It's none of the windings. All of the windings are down here, right? And so when I cut it, it doesn't really impact anything. You just gotta be very, very careful. If you really wanted to, if you have a bigger dust cap, you can leave this as is, but most likely I will go ahead and trim it a little bit. One thing I did also wanna mention, I'm gonna zoom in here, the previous points, solder points where the tinsel leads were tied over here to the voice coil previously, I went ahead and cleaned those up. They had epoxy on them, and so I exposed the solder joint there. I think that will kind of be easier to solder to. And what I'll do is, you can see the voice coil leads here. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. I'll bend those back, add some solder on there, and go ahead and solder them to this joint. Where I'm gonna have my epoxy placed is I wanna make sure I go ahead and fill the entire inside cavity with really good epoxy, as this is one of the biggest stress points to the subwoofers, so I want to make sure it's really well adhered. So what I'll do is I will solder it first. That way I don't disturb the epoxy once I put it in. At the same time, once it's soldered, the epoxy will fill it in and just protect it like they did from the factory. So one thing I did notice, it'll probably not make a big difference. Oh yeah, here's the voice coil part number. So you can see it's 140419 from Bass. So that's good that I was able to capture it there. One thing, what was I gonna say? Shucks. Okay. Oh yeah. One thing that I don't think is gonna make a difference. You see, there's some ventilation holes. Those were not present in the previous voice coil, and so it's good to have in here. But they're gonna be right below the spider, and I guess it'll help. But those were not present on the previous one. I do like that the aftermarket ones have them. A lot of manufacturers already have them built in, and so ventilation is good to circulate through the voice coil and help at least circle that or move that air around. All right, so next step is I'm going to put epoxy, solder the joints, and let's see what it looks like. All right, guys, so was able to go ahead and get everything in place as regards to the voice coil. Was able to place it in there, get it all centered, and then make my solder connections. And I'll talk a bit about that real quick. But once I soldered all of the voice coil leads, which again is aluminum voice coil on an aluminum former. You can see the other two leads here as well. I went ahead and epoxied it so you can kind of see the shininess here of the clear epoxy. I used 5-minute epoxy. Was very liberal in regards to making sure it's on there and making really good bonding over to the voice coil wall and the remaining of the cone itself. I will say soldering aluminum to aluminum or aluminum to the previous copper-like tinsel leads was a little difficult. I don't solder aluminum very often other than voice coils. Obviously, my industry is just copper, 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 so your traditional tin lead solder will do just fine. What I ended up having to do, in the past, I've used kind of Vaseline to help kind of remove kind of a significant layer off the coating of the aluminum to help with solder. That didn't work this time with this voice coil, so I had to go out and buy special solder from Amazon. This stuff, however you pronunciate it, was actually intended for stainless steel soldering, but in the description it also said aluminum, zinc, some other materials. So even though it's still 6337 tin lead, I'm not sure how the formulation is, but I was able to kind of get this to bond very, very, very well compared to the other solder I had at approximately 500 degrees F. So between about 475 and 500. And it really did a good job. So I was able to kind of bond the leads here. Other than that, I went ahead and cleaned out the frame. I got all the previous residue from the overall surround off. I was able to clean everything on here and place that. There's 4 total rings. So 2 rings hold the bottom spider, which again, that spider ring came off of. It wasn't really adhered well, and I'll get that adhered. And then there's 2 rings on the previous spider here, right? So there's a top spider and a bottom spider for the soft suspension. And here you can see where I've got my voice coil all set up properly, right at that red line at the edge. So I lined it up, made sure it was level. I will, putting this back, when I do put it in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little epoxy right over here on this edge, which is one of the triple rings. That way, when I set it in, it makes a really good bond to here. And now I've actually got this spider acting as part of the suspension, because before it looked like it came off. So I'm guessing it probably wasn't performing like it was intended from the manufacturer. Got the voice coil on here. Again, big shouts out to George at Lord of Bass. Very helpful, just reaching out to him because there's a gazillion different 3-inch diameter voice coils, and we found that this one kind of would be the best to fit in there. So appreciate it, George. All right, so everything looks good. Got it all cleaned up. Next step is to go ahead and get that in there kind of lined up. The cool thing is, with all the screws that are going to go in place here, I don't have to really use epoxy to hold anything in on the outside of the spider. It's only I'm going to be adhering this portion to this triple ring, but I'll put the ring, I'll actually put the epoxy on the ring, so when I'm placing it, it doesn't catch on here and get it all over the voice coil. That's the last thing you want. So I'll have the voice coil going down, and the very top of the voice coil will be the ring that has a little bit of epoxy on it, and when it sits, it should hopefully sit in place. And again, so this is kind of inverted, so I'll have the epoxy right over here, right? And as I set it down, that will catch right onto the bottom spider. All right, so here we go. All right, here it is. Final product, guys. Well, not quite final. We got to get that dust cap on there, but got it completely assembled. Running it right now, 20 hertz cycle. Sounds great. All the moving parts are moving, which is good. Only got a little bit of power right now, so at 12 volts on the input of the amplifier, only about 6 amps, right? So not a lot of power. Talking about 70 watts on the input, and I'll crank it up here in a little bit. But again, very pleased with how easy it was to repair. I think the complexity was low. What made it hard is the fact that it's just big on a bigger scale, right? Not very intimidating, so if you guys are patient with some of these bigger subwoofers, should be just as easy to repair those as any other rest. So let's give it a little bit more power here and see what we got. Get that going. My light's already flickering, so that's say 300 watts, and I'm already current limiting on my supply. Is it the supply? Nope, looks like it's the amplifier itself, and that is because I am running it at a 0.5 ohm. I've got both voice coils running parallel at the moment, so running this hertz amplifier at a 0.5 ohm is probably not great, so it's trying to protect itself. But here it is. We're looking at about 200 watts free air movement. Sounds great. Everything is doing what it should be. Final piece now is just to add the dust cap, and I got to figure out which dust cap I want to put on there. But here it is. Look at that excursion. This thing is gonna bang. I love it. Big, so should be a lot of output. Again, this is too big for any of the vehicles I have, just because of the box that they're gonna require. So something like this really needs about, minimum about 3 cubic feet, 3.5 cubic feet or so, for a nice ported box that's tuned anywhere from 26 to maybe 30 hertz or so, right? So really nice subwoofer, well built. I like the fact that it's somewhat modular. Makes sense that SoundCube, DB drive would also kind of use the same frame, same everything. So really cool. And again, doesn't even look like it's working very hard, but look at that excursion. This is only with a couple 100 watts, and the only thing limiting it now, I guess, is the amplifier. I should probably get one of my other amps. But you can see really good movement. Here's the voice coil, a lot of good air. You can probably feel the air right through the mic right here. If I put it right here, you should be able to hear it. Ventilation, I don't feel much here, so it looks like the ventilation is pretty good all around. Pretty cool. See how far I can push it before it goes back to clip. Yep, there it goes. The amplifier is trying to protect itself. I just need to get some more power up there. Cool. All right, well, hope you guys enjoy. So I'm going to make one final clip, maybe with the dust cap on. I don't have any 15 boxes at the moment, so I will try to find a box and mount it and make sure I can annoy all my neighbors. Thanks, guys.